Good afternoon. We're excited to be here with you all today and want to thank FAIR for the opportunity to speak with you. We thought we'd just introduce ourselves quickly, bigger on the screen, and then bring up the slides and hop right into it. So my name's Kevin Boyd. I'm manager of allergens and toxicology at the Hershey Company.
And I'm Megan Kenjora, and I lead Hershey's food safety culture.
So you can see from the title of our talk, we're not only going to talk about allergen management today, but also about the importance of a strong food safety culture. So I thought I'd start just a little bit sharing a story about my background and some views of allergen management as a consumer outside of the food industry, and then as a toxicologist working on food safety and allergen management in the food industry at the Hershey Company. So my oldest son has a peanut allergy, and as a consumer, there's no risk. There's never no risk in a situation, but we want to minimize the risk as much as possible in choosing foods for ourselves or our children or family members with food allergies. And I can remember when we first had the diagnosis, it was overwhelming. We didn't understand the regulations and what goes on. I think my first thought was, no, that's it. We're never going out to eat again. I'm going to have to take a vacation day every time we want to go to the grocery store because it's going to take forever. And the hardest thing for me was wanting to buy maybe the brand that was on sale versus the one that my wife or I had called and checked and determined we were comfortable with. And I quickly was broken of that habit when I'd come home and be sent right back out to the grocery store to rebuy the brand we had checked on. So it was 2 trips to the grocery store and definitely not saving any money at that point. And really, my assumptions of the food industry at that point in terms of allergen management was that it was kind of the Wild West and they didn't really understand or have a good comprehension of food allergies. So when the opportunity came with the Hershey Company, I was intrigued both professionally as a new challenge for a job, but also thinking I could bring a unique perspective as a food allergy parent and understanding some of the frustrations as a consumer and to make some meaningful change from the other side. And I quickly realized 2 things once I got to Hershey. And one was that I wasn't really that unique dealing with a food allergy on a personal level. And it makes sense if you think about the millions of people with food allergies and you think about the statistics that we hear about the number of students in a classroom, that these same types of numbers would apply to jobs and industries. And so we have a number of people at the Hershey Company, and they exist throughout the food industry that are dealing with allergies on a personal level. And having these people in different roles across the company, so it's not just in food safety, they're in marketing and all kinds of other roles, is a valuable perspective to have as allergen management, to really do it well involves everyone across many functions within the company. So dealing with this on the personal level, they can bring that experience to their colleagues and really kind of make it a tangible, real thing for the folks who don't have to deal with this every day outside of work. And the other thing I realized that I thought there was basically not a great understanding and not a lot of efforts in cleaning and allergen management. And I was wrong about that, is there's significant resources put towards allergen management. And it makes sense for 2 reasons. So one, no one wants to harm consumers. That's not a great business model. And 2, it's the law. So food allergy is one of the food safety hazards that must be controlled. And so there have to be robust allergen management practices to prevent cross contact. Another interesting thing as a consumer is frustrating sometimes calling companies and feeling like maybe they're dodging the question that you're asking or taking a long time to answer, and you wonder, do they really have a good handle of what's going on? And just from answering these questions on the other side, that communication is sometimes very complex. And so what seems like a simple question that you're asking isn't always so simple. And one of the factors here is that the specific situations and the nuances of each product and the way it's manufactured are critical to understanding and answering those questions. And so the context is very important. And as consumers, we think we want as much information as possible to make our choices. But if you've heard the term paralysis analysis or paralysis by analysis, that sometimes we have too much information that we don't know how to process it and what it truly means and to be able to make a strong decision. And so we're sort of at this strange impasse between consumers and food companies where we don't necessarily trust the labels as a consumer. When we call food companies, we don't necessarily trust the information we're getting. And so it's hard sometimes to make a decision. And so I think this is what boils down to sometimes we develop strategies like, well, I'm just going to avoid any facility that handles the allergen of concern for me. And in creating strategies like this, sometimes we're immediately eliminating options that would have less risk or the same risk as items that we regularly trust and consume. So just wanted to use this slide to kind of set some baseline of what we mean when we talk about cross-contact and precautionary allergen labeling. And so for cross-contact, what we're really talking about here is a small amount of allergen that's unintentionally found in a food where it's not supposed to be. And when if we would ask the question, when should precautionary allergen labeling be used? Well, I think we get a number of different answers from people as there's a variety of opinions on this topic. But if we tried to boil it down to a definition, we'd say when there's a chance of sporadic, unintentional, and unavoidable cross-contact. And the sporadic is key here because you'll hear people who maybe ignore some of these warning statements on packages and maybe they're fine and they don't have a reaction at that time. And that's because it is sporadic, that the allergen is not going to be there every time, but even following good manufacturing practices, if a risk is identified, then a warning label is used on the package. And then how is the decision of when to use precautionary allergen labeling made today? Well, I think as many of you know, these are voluntary statements, so there is no hard and fast answer that can be given. It depends, and it's going to differ by company depending on their strategy and their programs. But the one thing that is out there is FDA guidance that precautionary allergen labeling is not a substitute for good manufacturing practices, and the statements must be truthful and not misleading. So even if a statement's used, it doesn't mean you can skip cleaning because you're just going to slap a statement on there. You're still following good manufacturing practices and cleaning equipment and having allergen controls in place. And if we talk about truthful and not misleading and go through an example and kind of think about content versus context, a statement on a package that says manufactured in a facility that processes tree nuts. Well, some companies might use that as a literal sense. They might not believe there's any risk of tree nut cross-contact in that product, but in an effort of full transparency, there are tree nuts used in the facility, and so they put that statement on pack. And another company might have tree nuts processed in the facility, and based on that setup and how things are run, there might be a risk for tree nuts in the product that contains that warning. And so they're putting that on package to identify a meaningful risk. And as a consumer, if we were looking at these two products and one company was using it for full transparency and one company was using it to identify a risk, we don't know that when we're comparing those packages. And so one may look like it's not an option when really it's just providing additional information. And so having the context of the manufacturing environment and having companies get to a point where we're using these statements to provide meaningful risk, and then we're having other means such as our 1-800 numbers, our website, smart label, to provide the additional information that consumers want to make decisions within their comfort level. That will have, the labels will still have meaning, but the other information will still be available. And so if we think of allergen management on a spectrum going from unacceptable to ideal, we should never be doing anything in the unacceptable range. So if a project or a situation is identified that would fall into that category during the analysis, it wouldn't move forward. It'd be scrapped, or you make modifications or find a new manufacturing facility to move it out of that range. And if we're talking about the ideal end, this would be something like dedicated facilities that don't use certain allergens or dedicated lines within a facility. But we have thousands of products, and so it isn't practical to have dedicated lines or facilities for all of those. We do for some, but in many cases, we're operating in this middle zone where we're having shared equipment. And so we need a robust allergen management program to continue to make products safely and have effective allergen management. And so there's many food safety checks in place during the production process to look for anything that could go awry. And so the goal is that we're worrying about this so that you don't have to. And then the label is used if there's anything to communicate a meaningful risk, that's included on the label. And so if we think about allergen management and try and say, in its simplest form, what are we trying to do? I think it falls into these two buckets. So we're trying to prevent allergens from being where they're not supposed to be, and we're trying to put the right label with the right information on the right product. And if you think and you look at the recalls that are out there, many of them fall into this latter bucket of putting the right label on the right product. So for us, we have a lot of effort put into label verification, both in the development of the labels, trying to avoid confusion with colors and design, but also with having the right information on there and using the right packaging on the right product in the manufacturing facility. And so if you look at the bottom and we think of an allergen management continuum, so you're creating a program when you start. And if you think about this as managing an allergy yourself, it's overwhelming at first, but as you go along and you've lived with it for a while or cared for someone with a food allergy for a while, it becomes more manageable. You learn, you find what works, and you kind of get into a routine. And it's the same thing in manufacturing. So you've created this program. We have lots of experience managing allergens. So we've seen what works, how we can improve things. And every time something changes, if it's an ingredient supplier, a piece of equipment, a new product, we're reassessing that program and making changes if necessary. And that reassessment is happening anytime one of those factors occurs, but also just in the general day-to-day manufacturing, if you notice something and it gives us an opportunity to evolve and continually strengthen those programs, then we take that opportunity, whether it's making a small change to try and proactively prevent something from happening, maybe removing an allergenic ingredient that's no longer needed, or shifting things around to different manufacturing facilities or lines to minimize shared equipment and create more options within our product portfolio. And so I like to think of a quote here. It was a sports quote. It says, an amateur practices until they get something right, and a professional practices until they can't get something wrong. And so we're trying to fit into that latter end and always looking for opportunities and things to kind of engineer out the potential for something to go wrong. And so we're really, we have these two, that slide was breaking down the two major elements of allergen management from a high level, but there's a lot that goes into making those two things happen. And so it starts really with a food safety plan and a hazard analysis. So every process in a plant and every line and step of manufacturing a product that occurs has a hazard analysis, and you're looking at multiple elements of food safety and identifying, is there a hazard that could happen based on the process in this step? And if so, then you're defining steps and controls that you're going to put in place to minimize and try and prevent that from happening. And so chemicals. So allergens are one in the chemical category for a food safety plan that have to be controlled. And so we have corporate allergen programs. So that kind of sets the expectations and lays down that initial plan we were talking about on the previous slide. And then building off of that, each facility will have a specific allergen management program based on the nuances and the specifics of that facility. So depending on the allergens they handle, the products that they make, the types of equipment that they have, the facility layout, and any other number of factors. And the other big bucket for allergen management is the supply chain. So it's our ingredient suppliers. So we're auditing those suppliers and visiting them to look not only at their facility and how they manage allergens, but also full details of each ingredient we're purchasing from them. And then it's the transportation to make sure we're not introducing any allergen cross-contact and moving ingredients or products from one location to another. And so within the facility, just showing a number of factors here that go into allergen management. So people, traffic patterns, whether it be moving materials or people themselves, those are controlled patterns. So if people are working on a line with one allergen, we're trying to keep them in that area and not moving to other areas of the plant, manufacturing different products. You can see the little image of the manufacturing lines there also. So we try to have lines spaced out as much as possible, or use physical separation, such as walls, in cases where we want to have a barrier in between to prevent allergen cross-contact. And cleaning, of course, is a big one to managing allergens. And so there's cleaning procedures that we're looking at to make sure we can effectively remove allergens from a line. And we're using tools and brushes and utensils and things that are dedicated by line and allergen to make sure we're not creating cross-contact there. And also the way we move and transport materials, we have color-coded containers and labels to make sure we're not creating cross-contact risks in moving ingredients throughout the facility. And even as we clean equipment, we're breaking it down. So you're taking it down to taking the nuts and bolts off, opening it up so you can clean the inner parts of the equipment. So even the engineers and the mechanics, the tools that they use are controlled to prevent allergen cross-contact from one line to another. And the HVAC system, so we're looking at airflow and having positive and negative pressures where necessary to keep allergens in areas where they're used in products and not blowing air into other parts of the facility. And then, of course, testing is another means to look at effectiveness. So after we've cleaned a line, before we start the next product, you can test the equipment to make sure you're not finding any allergen, and do finished product testing on a basis to also look and make sure that you validated your cleaning procedures. So all of this is good programs. We have standards for all these things. People are following it. They've gotten experience over time, and it's great to have all these standards, but it's really the ability to change people's behaviors and have them translate to effective execution on the floor is critical So that's where Megan and the food safety culture really come in to make some of that happen.
Great, thanks, Kevin. So our food safety and quality culture mission is to embed food safety and quality into the hearts and minds of all of our employees. So why do we do that? The really biggest reason that we do that is to protect our consumers, to keep our consumers safe, whether that's from allergens or any type of other risk. That's really what our entire goal is to do. So the heart part of that is something that is unique to the food safety and quality culture piece. So those little guys over there on the left, they are my children, and and they're some of our biggest fans. But as we kind of go through building this, why is food safety important? Why are we doing all of these things? We're really trying to help everyone realize that consumers aren't some black box of random people somewhere disconnected from all of us. They're our friends, they're our family, they're the people that we care about. And so that personalization is what we try to do to help really engage our employees with food safety and quality, as well as be able to communicate a lot more meaningfully to everyone. So having a ginormous company with a ton of people, there are a few challenges in that. So taking a look at our workforce across the world, it's very diverse. Not only do we have a ton of different languages in areas where we operate, but we also have different national cultures that are coming to work every single day. And in this allergen space specifically, this diversity also includes people who have a personal connection to the food allergic community and people who do not have that connection to understand that why behind all of the important things that we do to prevent cross contact. So having that level of diversity that we're working with, plus all of these robust programs and policies and standards and requirements that Kevin kind of outlined, putting those two things together doesn't necessarily mean that people understand things to the level and degree that we need them to understand in terms of what they're doing in their work. So Hershey as a company has a really great culture. It is really based on these 5 behaviors, and right in the middle of those 5 is champion the consumer. And the food allergic consumer base is huge for us. We want to do everything that we can to provide you with the most options and really help to make sure that we're being consistent in our practices across the board. So we build on all of these different behaviors to, put food safety into the context, and allergens specifically, of having all of our employees own it and live it. And that means they understand their role in allergens and in other types of food safety situations, and they are implementing that in their jobs every single day. So we created this, this food safety kiss here to represent the fact that all of our global brands, which are all those little color swatches on there, no matter where you're at in the world, food safety is at the heart of all that we do and at the heart of championing all of our consumers. So one way of setting up that why behind food allergens in our plants and beyond, because it's not just in our plants, as Kevin mentioned, we take folks from around our company who have that personal connection with the food allergic community. So I'll start down here in the bottom corner. We tried to show the video, but it was too crazy with all of the different streaming and recording and then restreaming, and it just wouldn't look good. So I'll give you my best narration attempt. So Evan's dad down there in the bottom right corner, he actually works as a senior director in our network strategy group. So these are the people who are out there taking a look at Hershey's global manufacturing network, making sure that the things that we're making at our different facilities are, being made in the right place, right? We're not going to put some peanut stuff smack dab in the middle of a place that doesn't have peanut, if at all possible. He's the one that's really helping to take a look at our network from that high level and be able to say, this is what makes sense, and this is what makes most sense to help reduce that risk of allergen cross contact. Chris, down there in the left-hand corner, he actually has a peanut allergy himself. So he, every single day, understands the importance of allergen management. And thank goodness he does, because he's in charge of managing it at one of our largest facilities at Hershey. So he's out there every day owning it and living it and really helping people to understand what the importance of their job is. Up in the right-hand corner, Lucas's mom. Kevin just mentioned that we do lab testing to make sure that the allergen protein isn't in a place where it's not supposed to be. And she runs the labs who conduct those tests, and they do way more than just that. But it's good to know that she's there to really help everyone understand the importance of those tests and how it fits into our championing our consumers. And then finally, Julia's mom up at the top left, she is actually a labeling professional for Hershey. So before all of our labels get printed and go out to be put on our products, she's our last line of defense. So she's taking a look at those labels to make sure that every single allergen is on that label. Every single warning that we need to have on those labels is correct. And she's making that just absolute sure that everything is correct before we send it. So really, she's one of the last lines of defense, and we're able to have that peace of mind knowing that she's there to verify before we even send it out to the printer. And of course, Kevin Boyd, our manager of allergens and toxicology, he was in this video as well, but I feel like you've seen his face enough. But he has done such a great job in helping to take our culture journey to the next level by being able to directly have that connection and those conversations in his meeting. So he also spoke in this video too. So really helping to set up that why and overcome the diversity of people either understanding or not understanding the importance of their work is the one piece of it. That's the heart piece. And now we need to kind of get to that mind piece of the food safety in allergen management. So at Hershey, we manage 9 priority allergens. Sesame is in addition to the big 8. And we make sure that everyone understands all the specifics about allergens, how it's invisible sometimes, you can't see it necessarily if there's proteins there, and really goes through helping folks understand how their work impacts allergen management. So this is just one piece of it, this formal education part. There are different requirements written out in checklists that are used regularly to kind of reinforce this learning and all of the requirements. There's robust paperwork that needs to be filled out all the time and checks that need to be done to also reinforce this learning and really help us be sure that our programs are working properly. So it's very complex out there, and it's not just like, we'll go check the box and be done training on allergens for the year. It is a lot more than just that. So as you can see here, this is kind of the lot more than that. We've worked in the past to help raise awareness of both educating people on food allergens as well as helping to have our employees as well as people in our communities understand the different challenges that folks have living with a food allergy. So a lot of these you can see, a lot of our iconic landmarks we were able to light up in teal for Food Allergy Awareness Month. And also during that time, we were able to interact with both our consumers at Hershey, at the Hershey location of Chocolate World. And then up at the top there, we did employee engagement events as well to help people really understand allergens in their work and really understand what it means to live with a food allergy. So one of my favorite events that we have done to raise that awareness with our employees is down in the left-hand corner. It's a very anticlimactic picture. We are not photographers here. but the exercise that everyone is doing there was one of the most meaningful exercises that I've ever been part of. And so Kevin and I came together to say, how can we really get people to appreciate the challenge of reading so many labels? Like, we put numbers up and the amount of time and whatever, but they're just numbers. And those people who are responsible for our projects in our company, they don't understand that unless they have that personal connection. So Kevin had reached out to some groups and got actual food allergic consumers to share their story, to share their comfort level with whether they would accept something with a shared line or whether they would accept a facility statement. Really, that level of detail and that level of history for either themselves or for their children. And we put these little packets together for our employees after they had this lunch and learn talking about the importance of allergens and allergies. And they got to read their consumer story. So after they read that story, they had to take that food allergy and go shopping. So this is our little store that we set up in the back of all of our Hershey products. So Hershey doesn't just make chocolate. We also have popcorn. We also have like our Omega performance brands and like the protein cookie kind of things if you're not familiar. And we had a spread of really every kind of thing that we made at that time. And we told them to go and shop for their consumer. And all they had was the information on the label. So if they had inside knowledge of stuff, they couldn't use it in this shopping trip. They had to just shop like a consumer. And everyone was so stressed out because we were sending these packages to the actual consumers. We checked them, of course, to verify everything did follow line, so there was an extra check on that as well. But everyone's face in that exercise was just like, oh my gosh, how do we do this? They didn't know that we made things with fish, like our, those protein and nutrition bars. They have, fish oil in them. They didn't know that we have stuff with eggs. Our York product has eggs. So really just that awareness of the things that we do on a day-to-day basis. And someone that worked here for over 20 years was just like, this completely blew my mind. I had no idea. And this is the best exercise ever. And it was just really building that appreciation and having people understand that it's not easy to just say, oh, let's just put a warning on the label. And that's not how things work anyway, and no one thinks that. But it's way more complex than that in both living with a food allergy and in terms of your job impacting that community. So we try to do things not just in May, but all throughout the year to be able to help our employees better understand and appreciate the challenges of living with a food allergy so that when they're owning and living their role, they're able to understand where that is coming from. So that's all that we have. And thank you so much for having us.